Queen, said the royal sorcerer to Hatshepsut, with this amulet, you and your descendants are endowed by the goddess Isis with the powers of the animals and the elements. You will soar as the falcon soars, run with the speed of gazelles, and command the elements of sky and earth. 3,000 years later, a young science teacher dug up this lost treasure and found she was heir to the secrets of Isis. And so, unknown to even her closest friends, Rick Mason and Cindy Lee, she became a dual person. Andrea Thomas, teacher.
Almighty Isis.
And Isis, dedicated foe of evil, defender of the weak, champion of truth and justice.
I could have done it myself.
There's no shame in needing help.
Yeah, you think I'm a puny weakling just because I'm small. Well, listen, I don't need your help.
Everyone needs help sometime.
Welcome back, everyone, to an all-new episode of the Shazam ISIS podcast. It's your old mentor, John S. Drew here, and we're continuing that journey down the highways and byways of the land, reliving, reviewing those episodes that we love so much from those 1970s Saturday morning television live-action shows, Shazam and the Secrets of Isis. And my companion here in the Winnebago, as has always been since the very beginning, is the Big Red Cheese himself, Mr. Richard F. Lee. Hey, Richard.
Well, hello, Professor John. Are we going to do a brand new review today?
We are going to do a new review. In fact, we're going to do sort of two reviews because we've also got the next issue of the ISIS comic book coming up.
Oh, that's awesome. One thing about the comic books that they did for, like, the ISIS comic, they wanted to follow the TV series, and I thought they did it rather closely. As our listening audience has remembered that we reviewed the first few issues, and they appear to have followed the television show quite closely, and even the Shazam comic at this time was tailored towards the television show. Although there's one minor correction, John. You had said the Winnebago. They didn't drive a Winnebago. They drove an open road motorhome.
That's right.
And I've seen numerous open road motorhomes of that same model. And there's one person that I don't know the person at all, but they have one in their driveway. Now, I was tempted, John, to go up there and put a note under the windshield wiper and say, hey, are you willing to sell that? I saw one for sale at a used car lot for a very low price, and Jackson Bostwick himself encouraged me to buy it. I didn't pull the trigger at the time. I was going to. I thought, I don't think I want to splurge on something that I'm not going to use very much. But I had an opportunity, John, to get me a genuine open road motorhome in the same model, the same year, and I could put my own little lightning bolt on the front of it. It would have looked so cool.
It would have looked incredibly cool, but Richard, you missed a golden opportunity there. You could have traveled the byways and highways of the land with Jackson or John or Michael Gray.
Yes, and I would have been the mentor, wouldn't I?
You would have.
This is unreal. I mean, to me, I love the Batmobile from the 66 TV series. Of all the Batmobiles that ever been done, movies and whatnot, that's my favorite model. But to me, the open road motorhome on Shazam is right up there with the Batmobile. Okay? Yeah, no turbines to power on that thing, okay?
No.
But it would have been awesome to have. Now, I'm going to see if I cannot find another motorhome that someone is willing to sell me that is of 1974 vintage, open road, someone who is willing to sell that to me, and I'll put a lightning bolt on it to see if there's anybody on God's green earth who would recognize what I'm trying to do.
Okay. Well, I tell you, if Michael Gray could step out wearing Billy Batson's shirt, I'm sure some people would get it.
And that's true. Headline, folks, to all our listeners out there in podcast land, Michael Gray, none other than Billy Batson from the Shazam ISIS Hour, has been seen wearing his classic Billy Batson red and gold shirt in public once again. Yes, that's true.
Yeah. For an episode of Comic Book Men.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
And I think that makes our listeners excited to know that, hey, these shows have not been forgotten. I think in part we are accomplishing our mission, John, on this podcast, the Shazam ISIS podcast. We're accomplishing our mission to preserve the memory of these shows.
I agree. You know, Michael posted a couple of pictures from his appearance there, and it's funny because there's one with him surrounded, I guess, by the hosts of the show. I've never seen it. I have to admit,
seen it. It's a great show. It's Kevin Smith produces this show. I've seen it. It's a good show. There's all sorts of sci-fi, pop culture, comic book celebrities who go through the shop. It's very much like Pawn Stars, where they'll bring in a collectible item and ask what it's worth. Can I sell it? And you have that back and forth. I gotta ask Michael one of these times, is that a studio or is that a real comic book store? Because these things are staged, you know. Toy Hunter is staged, okay? Pawn Stars is staged. If you go to the real Pawn Star show location in Las Vegas and you see that antique store, you see the pawn store, that's not the one that you see on television. That's pretty staged.
Well, he went all the way out to New Jersey, so I would think, why wouldn't you? I mean, unless, of course, the store itself just wasn't big enough to handle all the cameras and such that they would be using for a show like this. It doesn't seem to make any sense for Michael to go all the way out there. Why didn't they just come to him?
That's true, except I think that there are studios out there. They have camera crews. In fact, on that show, Comic Book Men, there is a segment at the very end where Kevin Smith will speak to those who are on that show, and he'll speak to them in a studio. And the camera work is top grade, professionally well done. Now, when we're talking about the Shazam ISIS show, in those days, they worked on a very tight budget. They didn't have a lot of studios constructed for things like this. When they were doing a scene for the actors, they were using real locations. Like on ISIS, they used a real high school when they were not in session. When they had the motorhome, they used the motorhome. And they used as much outdoor exterior scenes as they possibly could to keep the budget down and use natural sunlight so they wouldn't have to use much light. So today, television production has become so sophisticated that it's possible to do something that looks like it's in a real store, but in reality, it's a studio. So I'm curious to know if, when we get around to seeing that episode of Comic Book Men, if Michael will or is able to disclose that that is in fact a studio and not a real comic book shop. I'm curious.
Well, we'll see. I mean, Michael's going to announce soon when that episode will air, so we'll keep you up to date on that as well over at the Shazam ISIS page over on Facebook.
And that's going to be an exciting time. So what do we have the first thing to review today, John?
Okay, well, first let's talk about the 4th issue of DC Comics' run of The Mighty ISIS. This story, well, actually, it's 2 stories. The first one is called Treasure of Lost Lake. Now, you said at the beginning of the show, the comics have been faithful to the series, and to a certain extent, I agree with you. Of course, being the comic and not having the limitations of a Saturday morning TV budget, they've been able to get away with more far out things like, you know, battles with gods and such. And it looks like this is going to be another one, but it isn't. And that's what I love about this story. It's called Treasure of Lost Lake. And it's written by Jack C. Harris with pencils by Mike Vosberg and inks by Vince Coletta. The basic story, ISIS finds that an ancient Indian legend of a lake monster has apparently come true, but we'll learn as we read through the story that it isn't true. And that's the real nice catch to this whole thing.
Yes, I do remember this story when I first read it back when it was published. And what's great about it, I look at it now, and there's this cheesy expression on the face of this octopus in the water with these giant tentacles that have ISIS in its grip. Now, when you said that this is not quite so faithful to the television show, you got to be right about that, because I've never remember seeing any of this in The Secrets of ISIS. This is just really out there. They're able to do some stories that feature things that just would not have occurred on a TV budget, and also that not necessarily had a moral to it. something a little different. But what's amazing is that the characterizations in the comic are very consistent with characterizations of the actors on the TV show, including their appearance, the kinds of things they would say, and even how they would say it. Very close.
I agree with you on that. Yeah, absolutely. Also, there's one thing that's really interesting here, because we've never really discussed this, I don't think we have, is where exactly ISIS is located, the whole series in terms of location in the country. From the TV show, it's clear that it's in California, but in this issue, we're learning that it's on the East Coast.
Yeah, it's a New England lake.
Yeah.
There's something very inconsistent here. Unless, of course, in this universe, California is New England.
Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, it's different.
Yeah.
Why would the writer make that type of decision to put this in New England? That doesn't make any sense. There wasn't necessary for them to do that.
No. Now, something else, too, you've commented on in the past is that the likenesses are pretty good for the comic book. I mean, we're never going to get exact likenesses, but I've got to admit, for this issue, I found the art to be a little awkward. There's one scene in particular when Andrea sends Cindy Lee running off, and we get this weird angle shot of her running with her legs outstretched as she's running. It just looked painful the way she was running.
You caught that too.
Yeah.
I first saw that as a kid. I'm going, that is a strange way to run. But have you noticed that in this issue, both Rick Mason and Cindy Lee are running barefoot?
Yes.
They're running barefoot, and then Rick Mason looks like he's been working out at the gym a lot. I mean, and he's running around in shorts.
Well,
I mean, he's exposing himself here. I mean, I'm sure that Brian Cutler would appreciate how beefcake he looks in this issue. I wonder if anyone's ever brought this particular issue to his attention.
Well, he kind of looks a little more like Lee Majors in the 4th season of $6 Million Man with the cheesy mustache, the way they drew it. Because they didn't give him the full mustache the way he has in the show.
That's true. Yeah. That's true. That's like, what was that, the Lee Majors porn stash, Austin, the 4th season? Yeah. The choices in that 4th season, I think there were some good stories on that. We're getting off track here, but they had some good stories. But, I mean, come on, Mr. Majors. Drop the mustache. It looked horrible.
Yeah, it did.
But this was the 1970s, so it would have been very much a common thing for someone to look like that, whether it's Lee Majors or Brian Cutler or whomever. You have to have a token person with a mustache in a TV series, just because it looks, I don't know what it's supposed to look like.
And yet, despite this all, I have to say I enjoyed the issue because, as I say, this wasn't a real Indian spirit. This was actually some guy who was trying to protect the treasures of the lake that he wanted to use for himself, because they're there to explore the lake treasures. And he's got this great way of making Isis doubt herself, because every time she sees something being thrown at her, she assumes that it's made of wood because he's an Indian. And so she casts the wrong spell. Right.
See, that's something that I caught as a kid. I understood it. What happens is this tomahawk throws these weapons. She uses a spell to try to stop them, but they never seem to work.
Right.
And so it turns out, as we're told in the story, that they're not really made out of wood. They're made out of other types of materials. And so she changes her incantation and is able to put an end to this fraud.
Right. And that the octopus itself is just a big machine.
Exactly. Now, you got to consider who would have been able to have the technology in those days to make a machine like that. That looks like one cool submarine in the shape of an octopus. It's great.
Well, you think about that. What he spent to make that octopus to protect those treasures, was it worth all that money?
I think it's similar to the coyote going after Roadrunner. Okay, because the coyote chases the Roadrunner to get something to eat, and with all the money he spends with Acme, why doesn't he just go out and buy a steak dinner? Okay. So is this guy spending a huge fortune on some machine when he's trying to save some type of treasure. That doesn't make sense, but hey, you got to put a machine that looks like an octopus in some story somewhere. Oh, and don't forget, you have your Scooby-Doo moment in this story. Scooby-Doo. I mean, this is on page 12. So if our listeners to the podcast, you get your hands on this issue, the Mighty Isis issue 4. Turn to page 12 for your Scooby-Doo moment.
Right. As they have the big reveal that he's not an Indian and they pull off the face mask.
He's no ghost. He's Mr. Mara. He selfishly sought the Indian treasure for his personal profit. He wanted it for exhibition for everyone. We wanted it for exhibition for everyone to enjoy. And this is great. There's a van on this too. A van. All you're missing is the dog. Okay, that's all you're missing. It's not there.
Well, if you think about it, it goes right back to the original premise of the show, them being detectives.
That's true.
You know?
That's correct.
Yeah.
And it would have been great if the ISIS TV series would have been a little more on that side. I mean, they've explored it in some episodes. We've covered some of that where Dr. Barnes is like a leader. This isn't just a school where you have a principal and some teachers and a teacher's assistant. It's more like a group of people who solve mysteries. And I think when we get into the future reviews of future episodes, there was a spin-off from The Secrets of ISIS that was planned. Right. With the two-part episodes, Now You See It, Now You Don't. I hope we get to those episodes very soon, because that was intended to be a spin-off where you had a group of young people solving mysteries. And I think that they had something already good with The Secrets of ISIS. Why couldn't they have done a little more of that?
Yeah. I don't know. But I gotta say, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the second story too, which, once again, that had more of a feel of the TV show. I mean, yes. There would be a lot of your favorite stock footage of avalanches going on, but it still would have worked.
Yes, this one is called Avalanche. And one thing that struck me, I think I saw this as a kid too. The story begins with a picture of ISIS standing in front of an avalanche as it's happening, leading us to the story. That would be awfully cold to be wearing that mini skirt there. That would be freezing.
Well, there's something else again, because of the California locations, we weren't going to get a snow, terrain episode of the TV show. So it was nice to see in the comic book.
True.
Yeah.
Now, did you see the depiction of how Andrea turns into ISIS on the third page of that story, where it's almost like Two-Face, half and half?
Yes. You didn't like it?
Well, no, because I didn't like that. I wish the comic book could have done something to show the actual transformation. The TV show lacked that, unlike Shazam, where you saw the transformation of Billy into Captain Marvel. Here in the series, you don't really see the transformation, how it happens. In the comic, I thought that's just a little too lazy for me. There wasn't anything in there to show a cool transformation with artwork that they had an opportunity to show.
Okay. Well, don't forget, too, though. I mean, are you talking about like a transformation within a panel, like it could have been a better transformation, or just something a bit more visual in terms of many panels? Because remember, this is the backup story. It's shorter, although this was also nice. This is the first backup story that actually is referenced in the main story when she mentions she's going off skiing.
Yes, it's page 12. It's next to that Mystery Machine van. Isis, or Andrea Thomas, says, "Sorry I missed the action again. I guess the Aqueductan treasure will remain lost. Well, at least I have my skiing trip to look forward to."
Yeah.
Okay, so that is a nice tie-in. It really is. It's a good transition. I like that when writers are clever enough to lead into another story.
Well, especially considering that while Vosberg did the pencils on this, they had a different writer in Steve Skeets and different inks in Bob Smith. So you would think that being a backup story, you wouldn't make any reference to it. But it's a nice thing. It's a nice tip to Denny O'Neil, who was the editor of the comic book at the time.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
And they paid attention to that. That is brilliant, I thought.
Yeah.
They put some care into the storytelling when really the 1970s was a time when I don't think you had a lot of continuity among comic books, not to the extent you have today. And there's some good continuity there.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, overall, the story itself is pretty straightforward about a hunter who manages to set off an avalanche with his gun when he's shooting down an elk. And, of course, ISIS has to step in and save not only the folks at the ski resort, but the hunter himself who's caught in the middle of it all. But what's interesting is the very end, when ISIS seems a little, I don't want to say harsh, but she certainly seems frustrated or angry at the whole situation, as she points out how man needs to understand that his laws come from the laws of nature. And it's an interesting touch because I don't want to get into it here, obviously, because that's going to be the next episode, but she gets into the whole natural law in the next issue, and that's when things start taking a turn for the difference in this whole series.
The laws of nature. When you say a natural law,
right,
and the laws of nature, do you mean more along the lines of animals and the environment, or you're talking about something that's innate in human beings? Are we getting philosophical here?
Well, I mean, from what she says here, I think she's referring more to nature as in animals and wildlife and the environment and such.
Okay, I see that too. I see that also. Now this is very good. The very last two frames, where it shows ISIS and they're wrapping up the story, and the hunter is taken off in a gurney in an ambulance. That ambulance is pretty close to the edge of the cliff. That's I don't think they get there that close. That's pretty close. But ISIS says he's a tough case. This kind causes untold amounts of destruction in their blind quest for manhood through slaughter.
Yeah.
Now, that's a very good line. It's a very good line.
It's a very good line, but that's also part of that whole anger, almost like that frustration. And
yes.
It sort of sets up what's going to happen in the next issue, I think.
Yeah, and there is some controversy here, because there are people who do like to hunt. And it's obvious that there is a bias here for anti-hunting and more of respecting nature and not hunting down animals, not killing animals. There's a vegan trend in here, and you can see that trend in here that leads into the comic, and that's something that was somewhat evident in the TV series too. It's not explicit, except for a couple of shows where there was a reference to something like that, where harming wildlife was something that was one of the worst sins against the environment that one could ever do. And here you even have it explicitly said that hunting is just awful. No one should do it.
Right.
It's in a comic. So, yeah, that would turn off some people who take a different view of that. But I can see where, for purposes of the story, what it's trying to direct us to.
Right. So, overall, you enjoyed it, right?
I enjoyed it. I thought it was good. As a kid, I do have to admit that I didn't quite understand it. I thought it was a good story. I didn't fully understand what any of that stuff meant, and I didn't really care. I thought it was cool that ISIS appeared in comic form. So I didn't give any thought to it, not to the extent that I do now. But I do have to admit, comic books, for all the slander that they've had to endure over the decades, comic books taught children to read.
True.
They really did.
True.
I learned a lot of vocabulary reading comic books. There was a lot of sophisticated things there that I didn't quite understand, but you could see how, in some ways, comic books were not entirely juvenile. They were written by adults, and there was adult sentences in comic book lines.
Yeah.
So I think it served a very valuable purpose. It taught children how to understand and read on a regular basis. So it's not like you're just confining reading to a school lesson. You're actually reading on your own.
You know, it's funny because this is my first time reading these issues as an adult. I only had one issue of ISIS, and we haven't even gotten to it yet in the original run. I think it was issue 6. It was the thing with the blob monster. Yeah. So it'll be really interesting to review that one, because then I'll be looking at it with both my kids' eyes and my adult eyes. But these have all just been adult eyes and making comparisons with the TV show.
Yeah. And it is good. I've had the benefit of reading these when they came out when I was a kid. And I've forgotten most of the basic stories, but I did remember a number of things from time to time. It brings back memories of when I first read this as a kid. I go, oh, yeah, I do remember that. And I didn't fully understand what the story was about, but yes, I do remember that now. And so it is interesting to be able to go back to something when you were a kid and see it with adult eyes and understand it from a whole new perspective. And I think that goes to the genius of story writers, that they can appeal to at least 2 levels. Otherwise, you're going to completely not get a good audience if you're only appealing to adults or only appealing to kids. And I think the comic books have done a very good job of being able to communicate a story to both sets of people, young people and adults.
Speaking of the TV show, we have an episode to review as well of ISIS from the first season. What are we doing this time?
This episode is called The Show Off. It aired on November 8th, 1975. Shooting began for this episode on August 11th, 1975. That's not too much earlier. They had very good turnaround in those days.
Yeah. Well, that was about 2 months. That was better than some of the other episodes that appeared to have only a month's turnover.
Yes.
You know?
And they worked fast. And everything that we've been told is that it took them only 2.5 days to shoot an episode. But even in that, you can tell just by looking at these old shows, these guys had to work when they made a show. They had to set up a scene. They had to light it properly. Cinematographer had to work. There's a lot of downtime because the actors have to just relax for a little bit. They're not quite ready to set up the shot. They set up the shot. They take a couple of takes or whatever. They move on to the next scene. These are pros. They know how to make a television show. And these are really mini movies when you think about it, because they were using 16mm film. This episode was written by David Wise and Kathleen Barnes. This was directed by Arnold Levin. And as we've mentioned in the prior podcast, Arnold Levin had directed other episodes of Shazam and ISIS, but also he worked with Lee Majors. And Arnold Levin, as I said before, Lee Majors was told by Arnold Levin, you're never going to get ahead in this business anywhere as an actor if you keep raising your eyebrow all the time.
Yeah. Well, good thing he didn't listen.
Good thing he didn't listen, because, right. I mean, we were all doing our Lee Majors impressions on the school grounds, weren't we, John?
Yeah, we were. Now, our guest cast, we have Harry Gold as Steve Elwood, Megan King as Roger Buck, and Harlan Ward as the zookeeper. Now, you have some information about Harry Gold.
Yes. I was checking out IMDb in anticipation for this episode, and according to IMDb, Harry Gold was born in Paris, France. He was raised in New York City, and Harry began his professional career as an actor at the age of 12. At the age of 12 when he was cast as one of Fagin's boys in the hit Broadway show Oliver. Thus began his professional career in show business. Throughout his teen years, Harry appeared in countless commercials and theater projects while also pursuing a career as a singer and a musician. In 1975, Harry and his wife-to-be, Bonnie, and their 2 daughters, Tracy and Missy, made the big move to California. Things happened very quickly. Harry booked guest roles in MASH, 8 is Enough, Maude, and many other TV shows. There were roles in films such as The World's Greatest Lover, American Family, and his favorite, Carrie. In 1981, after much soul-searching, Harry applied for a job at a small talent agency and began this new journey as a talent agent. 1 year later, with 2 employees, he opened up Harry Gold and Associates, representing adult actors. So he's had a very busy time working in the business.
So he's still doing that to this day.
According to IMDb, yes. I don't know of anything new, and I didn't bother to look him up to see where he's at, but it would be interesting if he were to contact us to talk about what it was like working on the Secrets of ISIS for 2.5 days.
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, maybe we can do a little reaching out if we can find his company and reach out to him, and he might be willing to come on and talk about it.
And that brings up another subject, too. All of our listeners to the podcast, when they listen to our show, I know that so many people enjoy listening to it. If you know any actor or performer or someone associated with the Shazam ISIS Hour who's worked on the show, let them know about our podcast. Get in touch with them. We would like to talk with them and talk about their times having to do with the show. Yes, we've spoken to the stars, but we want to talk to the people who walked through, who've been a part of it, who helped work behind the scenes.
Yeah, definitely. When we open this, we see a trio of boys are setting up a ladder to put up a sign.
Okay, guys, let's set it up right here.
There, that does it. Let's hold it up and see how it looks.
Whew. Just looking up there makes me dizzy. Hey, Stephanie, give me the corner of that poster.
What for?
I'm gonna put it up.
But Mr. Young said he'd do it, and he should be here soon.
Well, who wants to wait? Hey, his orders were not to go up that ladder. What, does he think we're too scared to do it ourselves? I'll show him who's scared.
Steve, please don't.
No, he won't listen to reason, but that's how an episode of ISIS begins. Usually, and always in the first season, Cindy Lee is around to witness a lot of these things.
Yes.
You got to remember, Cindy's the catalyst, really, because she's the one who knows the students we've never seen in prior episodes. And she knows what everybody is up to.
It's got mushrooms and pepperoni, meatballs, strawberry jam, onions.
Strawberry jam?
Well, yeah, but you have to see it to believe it. How's 8 o'clock?
This I have to see to believe. 8 o'clock.
Okay.
Now, that seems to me a little late for dinner.
Yeah.
Little late. Now we talked about this undercurrent before, John. Does this imply something here at 8 o'clock?
An 8 o'clock dinner. Yeah, maybe Rick's expecting something more.
Whoa. Okay. I bet he wanted to touch her amulet. Never mind.
Well, because, they tell us these days you shouldn't eat anything past 9 o'clock if you're going to bed soon after, because it'll just sit there and you gain fat.
Come on down, Steve.
Yeah, you don't have to show off for us. Hey, don't worry. It's a cinch.
Meanwhile, we see that one of the ladder rungs that Steve is climbing up gives out, and it falls away, so he dangles on the edge of the roof.
Hold it, Steve. I'll go get another ladder. I'm slipping. Hey, come on, hurry. Get some help. Hurry.
Andrea sees this, and she goes and makes the change.
Mighty ISIS.
She lands on the blue screen roof. Why?
The answer to a lot of questions is going to be, I don't know.
Come on, quick. Get some help, huh?
Well, you said blue screen roof. This triggers a horrid memory for me as I've been studying the world's worst film, a movie called The Room with Tommy Wiseau. Tommy Wiseau is the worst filmmaker who ever graced God's green earth.
Wow.
And he shot this picture himself with a fake blue screen roof, okay? He could have gone and shot his movie on a real rooftop, but instead they popped up a blue screen or a green screen with a fake set.
What's going on?
It's Steve. The ladder fell while he was all the way up. If it wasn't for ISIS.
ISIS?
Uh-huh. There's no telling what would have happened.
Okay, I'll go upstairs.
Okay.
You didn't have to pull me up. I could have done it myself.
There's no shame in needing help.
Yeah, you think I'm a puny weakling just because I'm small. Well, listen, I don't need your help.
Everyone needs help sometime.
That's easy for you to say. You can do anything.
Steve, you're smart enough to know that's not the point. Isis wasn't trying to put you down. She just wanted to make sure you didn't get hurt.
Taking dangerous chances doesn't prove you're a man.
Oh, yeah, but there was
There are
nobody
no buts about it. What Steve has to do is remember to use the muscles he has. The ones between his ears. Come on, we better get back to our classrooms. Thank you very much, Isis.
They could have put Joanna Cameron on a ladder and pretended that she's landing on top of the real roof that they're shooting this scene on.
Right.
And she could have just come down and rescued him, and that would have been Isis saves the day.
It just really throws the whole thing off in terms of...
It takes you out of the episode. It takes you out of it. Because blue screen work that they've done on Shazam and Isis actually was good for some scenes. It was good. By the time you get to this episode, it's unnecessary. You use things like blue screen when you have to have an effect shot for flying or whatever. Wherever possible on the first season of Shazam, they did not use blue screen.
Oh,
they had Jackson strapped to a harness, flying around town on top of a surfboard with the camera situated in such a way to give you the illusion that he's really flying. And when he landed, he jumped off a ladder with the camera angled in such a way to make it really look like he's coming in for a landing.
Yeah.
Here, it wasn't necessary. Joanna Cameron could have jumped off of a ladder, camera out of scene. She comes in a frame, and it would have been perfect. It would have been perfect. Shoot her from the waist up, where you're in front of a natural background, no green screen or blue screen or whatever. It would have been fine. An optical effect like blue screen or green screen was unnecessary for here. Unnecessary.
I'm just thinking, you mentioned the first season. I'm thinking of that episode where they're on that conveyor belt outside. You know, Jackson's there, the kids are there, and even the close-up shots, they didn't do anything like, okay, we'll go back to the studio and blue screen that. It's all authentic, it's all real, it's out there. And I'm like thinking, you're on the roof of a building. I mean, there had to have been some way to work that out. I realized then she's also got to lift him out to safety. And by the way, she really is strong, but it just...
Hey, she's Isis. You know, I look at Joanna Cameron. She maybe appears on camera to be a slip of a girl. She was not. She was strong.
Yeah.
But at the same time, she's a superheroine. What can you say?
Right.
Superhero, that explains it.
Exactly.
Later in the classroom, we see Rick Mason playing with what looks like a fishing reel. Is that what's he doing with a fishing reel in a classroom?
I don't know.
He's not really using the muscle between his ears at this moment.
Jeez.
So, well, Andrea is playing with a beaker. Now, I got to tell you, if you're in a science classroom where you got delicate beakers all over the place, that's one of the last places you would bring in a fishing pole. So, anyway, Rick and Andrea are speaking again.
Excuse me?
Okay.
And there's a knock at the door and finds that it's Tut.
I should have known.
Now, she puts this bird right on her arm. I mean, I understand that Joanna Cameron did not like this bird. That's what I've heard.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to give her a lot of credit. I mean, there she is working with him. She's got him on the arm. She's giving him a treat. She's placing him on the perch and then petting him gently.
You know, I think you're missing something.
About Tut?
No, about Steve.
Oh?
Haven't you noticed something curious about his behavior?
Only that he walks around as if he's the most important boy in school.
That's just it. He's obviously showing off.
Show off! Show off!
Show off?
Sure, to get attention. The trouble is that Steve showing off could cause more problems.
You mean the science club expedition?
That's pretty good for someone who doesn't like working with the bird.
Maybe so. But I still think that between us we can handle Steve and his need to show off.
Well, I hope so. Everybody's looking forward to this trip. I don't want anything to spoil it. Have you seen my new hat?
Oh, Rick. By any chance, are you planning to do some fishing on this expedition?
I sure am.
Well then, I think you should leave that thing at home or you'll frighten the fish away.
Show off! Show off! Show off!
Yeah, that is really good. And every time that Joanna Cameron interacted with Tut on screen, it looked real. It looked like she actually cared. She was a good actress.
Yeah.
I guess she couldn't stand this bird. Lou Scheimer told me, I'll name drop here, it was Lou Scheimer. He said to me, that bird was a pain in the rear to have to work with on set. So, I'm thinking to myself, why did you approve the bird then? I just think about that now. If the bird was such a pain in the neck to deal with, why did you have it in the scripts in the first place? Couldn't you have replaced it with a turtle or something?
Well, Lou Scheimer liked sidekicks.
He did.
Yeah.
Was Tut really a sidekick or just a catalyst to get ISIS messages back and forth? He did like sidekicks, definitely.
Yeah. Batmite.
Hello, 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 dynamic duo!
All right. Where are you, Batmite?
Ta-da!
Batmite, I thought we told you to stay in your own world and out of our hair.
I tried. I really did. But it was dreadfully boring. Besides, you need my help to fight evil.
Orko.
Yeah.
Today, He-Man was forced to play a dangerous game by the Game Master. The Game Master bragged a lot about winning all the time, but he became angry when he lost and said it wasn't fair. Well, playing games can be a lot of fun, but boasting when you win or getting angry when you lose spoils the fun for everyone. And pretty soon, nobody will want to play with you. So take a tip from me. Be a good winner and a good loser. You'll enjoy your games more, and so will the people who play with you. Good luck and goodbye!
Oh, Batmite. Thank you for reminding me, John. I went and got the Filmation Batman series.
Oh, cool.
And so I'm listening to Adam West and Burt Ward reprising their roles, and I forgot just how awful it was. But, hey, it's Batman, okay?
It's Batman.
Yeah. And so I can forgive it. And this is ISIS. I can forgive any flaws that poor little Tut might have had. He seemed a well-behaved bird, and I'm sure they had a bird wrangler on set to deal with it. I don't know. I'm guessing this is the only bird they had. I don't think they had another one.
Yeah, I don't know if there were several birds like there were several Maxes on the Bionic Woman.
Well, I think there's standards that Hollywood filmmakers and union members have to comply with. That They have to have multiple animals of a particular kind. They don't want to put the work of a scene on one animal too much.
Right.
So that has me a little thinking a little bit here. I guess they must have had only one Tut, because this is a low-budget show. They probably didn't need another bird. I thought the scenes with him were very good.
Yeah, yeah. Now, Rick expresses his concerns that Steve will ruin the science club trip that he's planned. But it just seems more interesting that Andrea gets in a shot at Rick's new hat. Yeah,
that is funny. That is funny. He's got that goofy hat. There's always something about, I'm thinking about this now. I think Rick Mason, in a way, was meant for comic relief. He gets to be the soundboard for Andrea, and he will often, be self-deprecating in some scripts, and he'll do something funny. Did the character of Rick Mason come across to you that way?
Sometimes, but I think that was more Brian Cutler, like just adding some humor in the way he presented some of the lines. I don't think they did it as, comic relief. Because the moment you say that, I know we talked about this a long time ago, about the Superman, Lois Lane, Jimmy Olsen, you got the trio there, you got that. I get the impression then that, like, Rick Mason's more like Jimmy Olsen than Lois Lane. And I don't think that's the case.
That's not the case, but I think you're right. I think that there's comic relief here, but yeah, you're right. It's hard to say what was in the minds of the writers, that he wasn't really meant to be a comic relief character because he comes across as very authoritative in this show. And without that, you really don't have something to reinforce the moral lesson that ISIS is going to try to teach our guest character of the week. I think his story responsibilities were pretty clear. He's not a romantic leading man. He's actually a teacher who, the way Brian Cutler played the character, he came across very realistic as a real teacher. he looked to me like a real high school teacher.
Oh yeah, no, he definitely came across as a real high school teacher. He even wore the clothing.
Yes, that was his own.
Yeah.
Because, when we talked with Brian Cutler about his time on The Secrets of ISIS, and he had a good time doing it, but in a way, I don't want to call myself awestruck about it, but he was someone that in that role as a school teacher, as a high school teacher, or whatever kind of teacher, that would have commanded respect, where he's someone who has a good sense of humor, he can be nice, approachable, but someone who can be a disciplinarian in the classroom. So anyway, he takes a goofy fishing cap, and he's going to go out on an expedition then. So in the next scene, John, we see there's a van with Rick and the students heading for the science campout. And they set up the site. Andrea Thomas sends Steve and Cindy off to gather firewood in this next scene.
Right.
Now, Andrea warns of traps that are set. Now, that's a nice setup. That's a nice, quick setup, because we're going to see that in just a few moments. She warns about the traps that are set out there, and now when gathering wood, Cindy notices a squirrel. Stock-footed squirrel, stock-footed squirrel. That's a repeated theme of Shazam ISIS. Stock footage.
You love your stock footage.
I love me some stock footage. But what are we going to say about the scene we saw a moment before? Stock footage roof? No. That was just awful blue screen. Okay. So, oh dear. So, in that scene, Steve gets the bright idea to look for the squirrel's nest, and he starts climbing the tree.
Yeah.
Now, Cindy, in her traditional blue overalls, she had that same costume in almost every episode, I swear. It seems to fit her. I don't know. But she wouldn't always wear the same costume in every episode, but that's something consistent on the part of the producers, I guess. So what happens is Cindy says, "Remember what happened the last time you climbed up." Ha, ha, ha. Now, Cindy wasn't watching where she was stepping, and her foot ends up in the trap that Andrea warned about just a few moments earlier, right?
Right.
So she wasn't watching where she was going. Maybe she just had her eye on him to make sure he wouldn't screw up. I don't know. So she gets caught in this trap, and Steve hops down and tries to get the trap open.
Are you all right, Cindy?
I'm fine.
Oh, look at that. The warning sign must have fallen down. All right, let me take a look at that.
Why don't you just call a ranger so he can tag me and then let me go?
Let me try to get it open, okay?
Come on, Steve. We'll be here all day if you don't go back for help.
Look, let me just try and get it open. I think I can pry it loose.
Never mind. Here they come.
I wondered what happened to you.
Old Bunglefoot walked herself right into one of those traps you warned us about.
Let me see.
It's okay, Miss Thomas. I think I've got it.
Well, you sure put your foot in it this time, didn't you?
The sign fell.
Mm-hmm. A likely story. Oh. Release, trap, press down firmly on arm and hold. There we go.
That was easy. Looks like I'm not the only dummy.
It's only an accident. Is your foot?
It's fine.
Hey, Steve.
Oh, nothing I ever do is right. I mean, I may be little, but I could have gotten down from that ladder yesterday, and I could have gotten Cindy out.
Steve, where are you going?
Oh, just leave me alone.
Oh, boy. Have you ever done this before, John? I think I have, okay? I have to admit, somebody asked me to do something that's semi-technical, like fix a doorknob or something. I can't do it. Somebody else comes along, does 100% better, and they get the kudos. Have this ever happened to you?
I'd say probably, yeah.
Happens to me every day. So I must have very low self-esteem. Here I am reviewing an episode of the ISIS episode about feeling inadequate. Oh, well. Cindy says, "Looks like I'm not the only dummy."
Yeah.
Ouch. Ooh, awkward moment, John. Awkward.
Well, Cindy wasn't helping either when she was saying earlier about, remember the last time you tried to climb something. It's like, wow, you're really batting 1,000 today.
Yeah. Oh, cultural sensitivity class for the awkward. So Steve gets upset because he couldn't get Cindy out of that trap. I may be little, but I couldn't gotten down from that ladder yesterday, and I could have got Cindy out. And he storms off.
Yeah.
Oh, boy. So this triggers him. This triggers this poor 1975 snowflake.
Wow.
Oh, dear. In a way, I feel bad for the kid. I actually do. I feel bad for him. And at the time I saw this episode as a kid, I didn't relate to the character, although I should have, because I could not do a whole lot of things. I really couldn't. I couldn't do a whole lot of things. Some would question that assessment now, John. But really, there's things that I could not do, things I could not figure out that this character could not do.
Right.
And someone else comes along, is able to do it thoughtlessly, with no effort. And he gets the credit for it. And that can steam a few people sometimes. It really can. Sure. It can set off insecurities. So I think there's a lot of people who can watch this episode and actually can benefit from it even today. We haven't gotten to the review or the assessment yet of this episode, but I'm saying just in that one scene, you can see him storm off, and I'm wondering if our viewing audience could not relate to that character in some way.
I'm sure that everybody could relate to that character at some point in their life where you don't feel adequate enough to do something. And I mean, in this case, it's size, but it could be something else too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we open with Act 2 after Steve has stormed off. Andrea goes off looking for him, and she finds him, and they discover a nest of owls. Steve knows something about the owls. And Andrea points out that the most important thing is being yourself and not being something you're not, when, she's impressed with his knowledge of owls. So, moral of the lesson, maybe? Maybe? You think?
Yeah, maybe. Now, this is ironic. Points out the most important thing is being yourself and not being something you're not. Now, she delivers this line very convincingly.
Yes.
She really does. I mean, I got to tell you, she might be a hot-looking teacher, okay? But Andrea is still a teacher.
Right.
And she does it very convincingly, but here's the irony. She's an actress saying that, okay? She's playing a teacher. She's an actress. The most important thing is being yourself and not something you're not, then you could not go into the acting profession then, okay? Does anybody else get that irony, John? I don't.
Well, what I thought was funny is then Steve points out that he won't get many friends or girls that way, being himself.
You're right. Steve, if I could talk to you into the screen to 1975 and go use my Wayback Machine, you're right, kid. I'm telling you, you are not going to get many girlfriends knowing about owls, okay? Not going to happen, buddy. Yeah. You're right. This is the equivalent, John, this is the equivalent of what I saw once in a cracked magazine parody of Happy Days. I cannot remember junk from last week. I can remember a cracked magazine from 40 plus years ago. Do you have that same problem that I have?
With certain things, yes.
A cracked magazine cracked magazine parody of Happy Days showing Potsy saying to some woman character, "Hey, beautiful, would you like to come to my place and see my milk bottle collection?" Now, to me, that struck me as hilarious when I was a kid when I read that. I got the joke. He's a square, and he's not going to impress people with dumb things. Now, I don't think knowing about owls is a dumb thing, but you're not going to impress people. You'll be a professor at NYU or something, but you're not going to impress people. Oh, boy.
I did, though, like Rick's words.
Well, what's the verdict?
Looks a little well done to me.
I mean, how was the walk?
Why don't you ask Steve?
I guess I owe everybody an apology.
Listen, it's easy to come on like Tarzan compared to the guts it takes to admit you're wrong.
That's true. It does take more courage to admit that you're wrong. And I have to really squeeze out of people to admit they're wrong. Me, I'm wrong all the time. You know, I would be up all day if I'd admit I'm wrong. I'm wrong all the time. Who cares? Anyway, so now much later, the group heads to a fishing hole. Now we're shifting an entire theme here, John. I think this is in this act we are shifting a theme. I think that this is where I like this episode where it's going so far, John. But they're sabotaging his story arc, his character arc. I think at this point. This is what it looks like to me. Steve has this character arc. Andrea's trying to teach him a lesson about being himself and so on. And I don't know. It's shifting directions. Because now the group heads to this fishing hole and some head to a ranger station. Andrea's group is walking. When a zookeeper stops and asks if they are the group from the high school. The zookeeper warns them of an escaped gorilla in the area. His name is Rufu, and he was last seen at the location. Now, who names their gorilla Rufu? Okay?
Rufy, maybe.
Rufy? They must have been smoking a few of these when they were doing that part. What happened here for a second, before we get into the details of this part? What happened here? Did the writers say, oh, we're tired of that story arc, let's go to something else?
Well, I don't know. I mean, in the end, it'll come back to him, though, sort of, right?
I suppose. I guess. I don't know. But if you run out of ideas in writing a story, throw in a gorilla. So Rufu, he was last seen at a location where the others from the camping ground were headed. Boom, boom, boom. We know where this is going. Now, Andrea's group heads back to the camp while Rick's group reaches Craigie Glen?
Craigie Glen.
Craigie Glen. They must have been smoking Rufus if they're trying to come up with names like that, okay? Andrea runs off to meet up with Rick.
By the ice.
Oh, zephyr winds which blow on high, lift me now so I can fly.
I do have to give the show credit. Maybe they learned their mistakes from the first season of Shazam, where fans of the show, they don't want to see the superhero appear at the last minute. They want to see the superhero appear early and appear later.
It's a landslide. Quick, everyone in that cave.
Stock footage landslide. Happens. Now, you're right about when we did the comic book review, they would have used stock footage of an avalanche. Now, Rick rushes his group into a cave that gets sealed up.
Oh, no!
I think we're trapped. Now, listen carefully and don't panic, all right? Everything will be okay. We'll just have to wait here until someone comes to help us. Okay, no sudden moves. Just cool it. Take it easy. Whatever it is just as scared as we are. I hope.
And it just so happens that Rufu is with them. Oh, geez, that's not predictable at all. Oh, no.
Yeah. And you know, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I think you're right. I mean, because Isis spots Rick's gear from the air, makes another blue screen landing. She calls out and finds that they're in the cave.
Rick Mason!
Isis, we're in the cave. We're trapped in here with some kind of wild animal.
Hang on!
Everybody freeze. No sudden moves. Isis, the cave's collapsing.
Oh, great forces from time long past, help me hold this mountain fast.
It's holding, Isis, it's holding.
Oh, jungle animal, awesome sight. Help my friends with all thy might.
And once again, we get an example of her strength, just like we did before. She moves the rocks out of the way instead of using magic. But then she uses her magic to steady the hill and to get the gorilla to help the kids and Rick escape. But this whole time, where's Steve's story?
Where is Steve's story? We've forgotten his story.
Yeah.
It doesn't serve the story when we shift directions into something completely different.
Right.
Completely different. Now, I think for our eagle-eyed viewers, this looks to be, in this episode, the same location that was used in previous episodes of Shazam. I think so. I think this might have been the same cave that they're going to use for a future episode that we're going to review in Shazam, and Isis, where Isis is a guest character, out of focus. I think this might be the same area, out of focus.
Right.
And it also might be the same cave that Jackson Bostwick was in for Fool's Gold. It might be. I could be wrong, but I think it could be. Okay, no problem with what Isis is doing as far as rescuing Rick and calming down the gorilla and rescuing the gang that's there. That's a different story. This is a different story.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with Steve anymore. That story arc, that character arc, was wrapped up earlier in Act 2.
Isis! Please, back off. He could be dangerous.
Dangerous? I'd say I have a friend for life.
Well, I'll be. I never thought old Roof would trust anyone but me.
I have a way with animals.
You sure have. Okay, come on. Come on. That's a good fella. Come on. Come on. Come on. That's it. All right now. Come on. Come on. Come on. Here we go. Up in the back. Up there. Up there, boy. Go on. That's it. Sit down. Sit down. Sit down. Down there.
Hey, did you see the way Rufu pushed that boulder? Boy, you talk about strong. You mean you're not going to try and show us that you're stronger than he is? I might have yesterday, but not anymore. Hey, look at that. You know that's a burrowing owl? It's one of the few birds that actually makes its nest on the ground.
Why, Steve, you're an ornithologist.
Yeah, I'm an ornithologist. Hey, look at that one over there. Come here.
Thank you, Isis. We couldn't have done it without you.
It's a good thing you dropped your hat. That's how I found you.
Oh, did you like it?
Well, be careful. It might frighten the fish away.
Funny. It's just what Andrea said. Hey, she couldn't be the... No. Could she?
We've seen that happen with Rick before, haven't we?
Yeah.
Oh, that's something that Isis said, or that's something that Andrea said. It's a wink to the audience. It is. It's a wink to the audience. It's cute. And, of course, it's obvious that we know the answer and that Rick Mason and Cindy Lee are too dumb to figure out that Isis and Andrea are the same person. Yeah, we know the joke. It's funny. We get it. But at least the gorilla should have worn eyeshadow under his mask, John.
Wait a minute.
Planet of the Apes had better production values than that gorilla.
Wait a minute. You mean Rufu wasn't real?
Oh, boy. Oh, yeah, he's as real as a slee stack on the other. Okay. Oh, no, there's something really perverse about this, okay? This gorilla, I don't know why I think about this, but this gorilla looks like he's something out of a 1970s porno film. I'm sorry.
Wow.
Now, not that I know anything about such things.
Okay.
That's such I'm told. But he looks like something out of some the costume is horrible, okay? Mm-hmm. It just doesn't work. But why a gorilla? That's what I want to know. Why a gorilla? Now, we had a bear who stood on his own 2 legs in a prior episode, right?
Right.
We had a bear. Now we've got a gorilla. Why the gorilla? I don't know why. I really don't know why. Why was it necessary for a gorilla to be in this story? I'm not getting that. He upstaged Steve, who's the character who has to have a character arc.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
It's a shame. It's a shame because it was a good first act.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then this reminds like Tracy the gorilla from Ghostbusters. Okay. They could have hired Bob Burns to do this. He would have done a much better job. He had his own gorilla costume. And so they put him on the cargo vehicle, and he waves bye-bye practically. Oh. And we can't end this episode without Steve mentioning one more time the stock footage owl again. We got another stock footage owl we're treated to. Oh, jeez. That's like so tacked on. Oh, boy.
So what about the stunts?
Well, the stunt in this show was by the guest star, and it happens to be him holding onto the top of the building.
Is that really him?
I don't know. I mean, it looks like his hands are so small. I think it's gotta be him. Oh, dear.
Most of the time when you have a stuntman in there and possibly, they have to wear a wig, you can tell the difference between the stunt person and the real person. And to me, looking at it, that very well could be him.
Yeah. And he might have been willing to do it, too. I mean, I think at this point, he was a pretty professional actor. I think he would have been willing to do his own stunt, and it would have been quick.
Right.
And he could have been standing on top of something with his hands up there on top of that rooftop and not in any real danger. I think he would have done it, and he would have been a good sport about it. And did fine. It would have been probably too rushed to find somebody else who could do a stunt. It may not have been necessary.
Mm-hmm.
So, what are the fashion statements for this episode, John?
Well, Rick's hat. I mean, it's pretty ugly, and it reminded me of Rudy Wells from $6 Million Man and Bionic Woman, because there were times he wore ugly hats.
Well, I guess that covers it. Unless you two ran into something on those Pacific Islands that I don't know about.
Nothing that I know of.
Well, one thing. What? Well, it may be a strange native custom. Like what? Actually, more like a unique native dress. I don't get it, Steve. What are you talking about? I brought back a sample. You know, I've never seen anything like this before. No one else has either. What is it? Where'd you get it? Rudy. Rudy!
Now, come on, guys. You're making a big thing out of a little hat. I mean, guys wear colorful things in the islands, right? I don't care what anybody says. I like it. Well, what's wrong with it?
Just like that, but I think this one that Rick has tops them all.
Oh, yeah. His hat, all that was missing, really, are all those little fish hooks hanging out of those fish eyes on the hat. Did you notice any hooks on it? I didn't catch that, if there were.
No, there were no hooks.
We will return to ISIS after these messages.
In the news, one short minute that wrecked lives forever. This week, an earthquake struck one of the Philippine Islands, killing over 3,000 people In a moment, more about this earthquake disaster in the news.
In the News is sponsored by Nabisco. You'll find quality in our corner.
Oh, hi, Big Fig here. No, that's not the Newton. Hit it, Hal. Ooey-gooey, rich and chewy inside. Left, right, take a bite. Golden, flaky, tender, cakey outside. Up, down, turn around. Big Newton cakes from Nabisco. Oh, you can't do the Newton if a Newton it's not. But if it's by Nabisco, a Big Newton's what you've got. Let's do the Big Fig Newton.
This week, the southern island in the Philippines, Mindanao, looked like this from the air. An earthquake struck Tuesday, wrecking thousands of lives and millions of dollars worth of property. The Philippines are right in the middle of the Pacific section of what scientists call the earthquake belt. 8 out of 10 major earthquakes occur in this belt. The quake did its worst damage on the southern coast of Mindanao. Most of the damage came from a huge tidal wave that rolled in from the Celebes Sea with waves up to 18 feet tall. A tidal wave is set in motion by an earthquake under the sea. Scientists know that earthquakes happen when there is a shifting of the Earth's surface. They know that parts of this surface are in motion all the time. The mountains, which we see today, in ancient times were undersea rocks. Scientists have good ways of measuring small and large shifts of the Earth. They measure the vibrations of the Earth with instruments called seismographs. They hope one day to have precise ways of predicting when and where earthquakes will happen. But the scientists just don't know enough yet to help people like these in the Philippines. Most had little warning of the earthquake. About all they can do now is to pick up and try to recover from the terrible effects of this week's earthquake disaster in the news.
Someone in this building hates me.
He's Ivan the Terrible, the lovable Russian, premiering this summer.
Tonight on CBS.
And now, back to ISIS.
Today, Steve learned that showing off may bring attention to yourself, but it isn't the way to gain respect. Respect is something that must be earned, and the best way to start is by being honest with yourself. Trying to be someone you're not only makes you look foolish, and sometimes it can be very dangerous. See you next week.
I got to be honest with you. I was a lot more positive going into this show, and then talking to you about it, I got to change things up because I put down, does it hold up? Honestly, no, it doesn't. This does not hold up as a story. as the moral, yes. I mean, the moral holds up, but the problem is the story lets it down.
Yes.
You know?
It does. It's not good. I think what they wrote is fine, except they don't go together.
Right.
Those are two separate stories. They don't go together. They have no point. It's like one episode leads into another one. You got 2 episodes in one episode of ISIS. It just is not good. It's not a smooth transition on that part. You had a pretty good moral with the character Steve, who felt inadequate. And I think that's a good thing that they brought out, that you can't pretend to be something else that you're really not. But at the same time, gorilla! What?
Yeah.
That just, it throws the story off. What?
Yeah.
Can we, another 70s reference, can we say that, oh, this is bad? I like ISIS. I'm not dissing ISIS at all, but has the show started to jump the shark?
Oh, no.
No? Okay.
No, I wouldn't go that far. I think this was just a poorly executed story. And like you said before, you know, it's just, we totally forget Steve's arc. And because it's funny, because when Isis shows up for the moral at the beginning, she says, today Steve learned. And I'm like, Did he really? Because we kind of left him off at the end, kind of complaining to Andrea how he can't get girls, being himself.
That's true. The thing is, I hate to admit it, but that's true.
Yeah.
Okay? That's true. You every guy in the world knows it. You lie to get girls, okay? This is true. And I've been so honest my whole life. No wonder what nobody wants anything to do with me. I'm a crazy cat man. Don't worry about me. Oh dear. Now, see, the problem is that the final dilemma is not brought on by a bad choice of the guest star. I think I brought this up earlier.
Yes.
It would have been neat to say, okay, he messed up by going on the ladder, and Isis had to rescue him. And he's upset and storms off when he could not get Cindy out of that trap that Rick so easily did. He gets mad, he storms off, and he gets himself into trouble, and Isis has to rescue him again. That's how other Isis stories have been told. This time they said, forget that. Let's go with the gorilla. It doesn't work. This is not brought on. The dilemma at the very end is not a choice of our guest actor or guest star, but by Rick Mason. He chose to hide in the cave where the gorilla just happened to be hiding out. Now, there isn't really any showing off by the teenager this week. In the last half of the episode, that requires Isis's intervention. I think when I first saw this episode and I was preparing my notes, John, I think that's why I was willing to give it such a low rating. We're going to get to the tuts in a second. I'm tipping off the audience before we give them your rating. I am going to give this a low rating. So, John, do we get to the tuts now?
Sure. Why don't you start?
All right. I'll start first rather than defer to you then. I have to give this episode 2 out of 5 tuts, which is tragic because I think the first half was well written, well executed. I think when they did this episode in 2.5 days, the first day they were on a roll. They knew what their story responsibilities were. The second day of shooting this episode, I think the writer and the director said, screw it, they're high off of something. Let's just throw it.
Too many roofers. Well, I got to admit, I started off being a lot more positive about this. I had a higher rating. I'm actually going to go your way as well, and I totally agree with you. This is only a 2 out of 5 tuts.
Now, John, you were going to rate this episode
a 4.
What? 4 out of 5 tuts.
Yeah.
4 out of 5 tuts. And then
I was being too kind.
Oh, you were being too kind, but I'm not very gifted with the powers of persuasion. I try to be. But I persuaded you to bring your grade all the way down to a 2 out of 5. That's below average.
Yeah. But this is a below average episode. You're right. I kind of was distracted by the ape and the whole thing with Isis and the ape and it just being so silly that I was like, this is fun. But then in the end, you've got to ask yourself, where did this story go? And after Act 1, it became, like you said, a whole new episode.
Correct. And this is almost like grading, because you're a teacher, you know how to grade by letters. Your original grade was essentially a B.
Right.
And 4 out of 5, and then you brought it down to a D.
Yep.
Wow, that's a big difference. I was happy when I got B's in school. And to reconsider your work and go, I was going to give you a B, but I think you're a D after all. That's a big change.
Yeah.
That's a big change. And speaking of cuts, I shouldn't be putting out puns with double entendres, but did you see that gorilla attempt to grab Isis's tuts? Okay? There is. I'm not making that up. Go back and look at the episode where the gorilla is about to stop and he puts his hands up and he looks like he's about to do something to Isis. Okay? Oh, man. Couldn't the director have said, cut, let's reshoot that. It looks like you're trying to grab for something. Oh. Part of watching that made me feel a little uncomfortable that 8-year-olds will be watching this, John. Ugh.
Oh. Kind of reminded me of the Wonder Woman episode with the gorilla as well.
Oh, no. Did they have I saw that years ago. I don't remember it. Was it the same gorilla?
No, actually, it was a little bit better costume, but again, he was a very grabby gorilla too.
Oh, good God. What is it about superheroines clad in nice outfits that causes gorillas to do things that are wholly inappropriate?
I guess. I don't know. Thank goodness Lindsay Wagner never did that.
Oh. She never had a gorilla in The Bionic Woman, did she?
No.
Okay, good.
Nope.
Oh, see, they all have helicopter stories.
Yes.
There's always a helicopter with each of those heroines, and superheroes are using a helicopter in the 1970s, but no gorilla.
No gorilla.
Oh dear.
Well, that's going to bring us to the end of this episode, 2 out of 5 tuts. It's been a while since we've given a low rating.
Yeah, it has, but at least ISIS is still the gorilla of our dreams.
Oh, jeez. All right, with that, let's tell them about next episode. Next episode, Andrea and her students are trapped in a ghost town with a group of robbers in an episode titled No Drums, No Trumpets. I'm looking forward to this one because it's, again, another one of those 70s cliches, the fascination with ghost towns.
Yes, it is. And I think that it's not spoiling it yet for our listening audience to let them know that our opinion of that episode, No Drums, No Trumpets, is very likely to be a little better than the one grade that we gave this episode.
Right. Exactly. So until then, folks, thank you so much for listening. Make sure you're heading on over to the Facebook page and to the Shazam ISIS podcast.com page and let us know what you think of these episodes. So until then, thank you so much for listening. Richard, everyone, take care.
Take care, everyone, and like us on Facebook, and we want your comments.